What is up, fellow nerds, and welcome to Not Your Status Quo. I'm Keith, and today we will be doing a breakdown and review of The Mandalorian Season 2, Chapter 12, The Siege, and Chapter 13, The Jedi. Hey, Dave, remember, do not let the red wire and the blue wire touch because... Are you all right?
Yeah, I'm fine. It was worth a shot. Hey everyone, I'm Dave, and remember to hit the like and subscribe button. And if you like what you see, please hit the bell and be notified of future videos. And of course, share this with your friends.
What's going on? And I am Doug, and today we have got something as special as a high M count sample for you guys. Today, we're going to have our very first contest/giveaway. That's right. Later on in this video, we're going to reveal how you can win a year subscription to Disney Plus on us. But first, let's break it down.
Break it down for me, fellas.
Here we go.
Chapter 12, The Siege. We're going to start there. We weren't able to record last week due to some unforeseen issues, but we're back. We're going to combine this video into Chapter 12 and Chapter 13, and we'll be back weekly after this. So thanks, everybody, for coming out and watching. And I think we should start with that opening scene from Chapter 12, only for one reason. That was where Cara Dune was in the armorer's area back on Nevarro, and she's cleaning out those bad guys. And I think that was just put there as a clear indication that Din Djarin's clan is no longer on Nevarro. It's been cleared out. They're somewhere else. And I don't know if he's going to ever run into him again. But, I mean, they made it pretty well known that they are no longer on Nevarro.
Yeah, you know, that does make it pretty difficult. You notice that we haven't had any flashbacks. And I think that's because we haven't had the armorer there to make any new armor pieces for Din. So, therefore, we can't delve any more into his past. It's kind of disappointing. I was looking forward to that this season.
And I like how it also showed that she stayed around to do what she agreed to do with Greef from the first season. Stay there and clean up the town, clean up the planet, really. And she's the Marshal now. So good on her.
And now I think to the big parts of Chapter 12, The Siege, is the cloning that was going on in the base of operations that they were overwhelming and blowing up in the long run. And the fact that, you know, we found out that Grogu's blood was being used to help move these clones, possibly, you know, stronger in the Force or just able to bring them back to life. You know, maybe the cloning process, since it's not being done on Kimono, it's not as, you know, clear cut. They don't have all the processes down. So it's them trying to get all of this cut. You know, we found out that Grogu has a very high M count. You know, flashback to episode 1 with the midichlorians. And just the fact that they're having some trouble. And in one of the cells, it did look like a little bit like it was possibly Snoke. But, you know, what do the rest of you think? I know we have disagreeing opinions on this. So,
Yeah, I don't think that is Snoke. I think it's just a failed project. But you know, you can interpret it that way so that it does lead up into the sequel trilogy. I think that Filoni and Favreau are really good at writing stories, and they can find a way to make it all work together. But at the same time, like Keith said, this is not happening on Camino. It might, you know, it might be the first few trials. I don't know. I just don't think it was them. I think what he's doing is making force sensitive super troopers. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, actually, I'm more or less in agreement with that. I don't think that was Snoke, the Snoke that we end up seeing in the sequels, but I'm gonna kind of use the word Snoke as like more of a noun, that it was a Snoke, as in yeah, I kind of agree with Dave in the fact that this was probably a failed clone experiment, and going off of the logic that they used in Rise of Skywalker, it sounds like all of the Snokes were, in their own way, failed clones, because Palpatine himself couldn't put himself inside of, oh, sorry, if this is a spoiler for you, if you weren't aware of that mess in the Rise of Skywalker, sorry, I just spoiled the big secret for you. But yeah, so Palpatine, who was back, I guess, couldn't put himself into the body of Snoke. And so he, I guess, kind of just let him go off and Snoke around and do the whole First Order thing, which one thing that I don't know if I'm in agreement with everybody on this, but from what I understand, the First Order, the Empire, and the Final Order were three separate entities. They were related to one another, but they were not the same thing. The Empire was purely Palpatine's governmental system that evolved from the Galactic Republic, and became the Imperial Senate. Became the Imperial, the Empire. And the First Order, I think, was basically space Nazis that worshipped the idea of the Emperor, but they were not. They weren't a governmental system in and of themselves. They were terrorists. Basically, that's all they really were. They weren't in charge of anything. They just used their powers to sort of take to destroy planets and everything. And as far as Snoke goes, I don't think they were even aware that he was a clone. I don't think that they were aware that he had anything to do with Palpatine or the Empire or anything like that. My best guess is once Snoke had been released from his tube or whatever, after he had somehow been given his higher M count, if they had finally figured it out, whether it was from Grogu's blood or what have you. My guess is he just was either sent to the First Order as like a bit of subterfuge, or it was more of just a natural, hey, these guys seem pretty cool. I kind of like space Nazis. I don't know. But yeah, at the moment, what we're looking at is these cloning experiments. This is all the remnants of the Empire. And if you did happen to see the Rise of Skywalker, there was that one guy on the planet that the Resistance was hanging out on that actually says, which was a little odd in retrospect, he says, yes, cloning, that is a secret dark art of the Sith, which, I mean, not really. I guess they kind of took it maybe by that point, but I wouldn't really call it a dark art of the Sith.
No, you're right, Doug, especially since a whole planet was doing it and built an entire army out of clones of Jango Fett. I think maybe it was more along the lines of getting force sensitive, clones, which they're trying to do with Grogu's blood. And this is probably something that couldn't be perfected on Kamino. And obviously the Emperor got it done at some point, whether it's through Grogu's blood or whatever, to get himself back, if we want to pretend that happened. But I think Dave is also right about, at the end, when you see Moff Gideon with those troopers, it reminded me of the Dark Troopers from, I think, Jedi. It was one of the Dark Force Rising or one of the video games that came out where they had force sensitive troopers, which, hey, let's hope they finally get some troopers that can actually hit somebody.
All right. So, yeah, like Keith said, we're not going to spend too much time on this particular chapter of the Siege. It was a very good episode. There was a lot of cool stuff in there. He mentioned the whole cloning aspect of it, which was like the big reveal of this episode. I think it was really cool to once again sort of see where the Rebel Alliance is now with the New Republic. Sort of like where they're at in this world, and kind of how they've all sort of grown in a way. So Cara Dune, she's, as Dave and Keith mentioned, she's basically the Marshal of this planet now, sort of maintaining law and order, getting rid of the baddies, as you saw. And we see that one of her former, I guess, cohorts or whatever, somebody who also served in the rebellion, is trying to say, hey, we could use people like you. But as we saw in the previous episode, I mean, what are they really other than intergalactic cops? So I can't imagine that she would find a whole lot of joy in returning, to a life like that. I think she finds more fulfillment doing what she's doing now.
Yeah, and at the end where Doug just mentioned, he says we could use someone like you. She says, "I'm not a joiner, Blue." That's like confirmation right there. Blue means police, right? So they're the police of the galaxy.
And now we're moving on to chapter 13, the Jedi, which I think was the perfect introduction to Ahsoka Tano in live action. I really enjoyed the opening scene where she was fighting the guards, from the magistrate's place, and she was kind of like fading in and out. She was showing her creativity on the battlefield. She was cutting through the trees and using those to knock other guys down, lurking back into the shadows. And I think it was just a wonderful, wonderful way to introduce Ahsoka into live action.
Yeah, I thought her fighting style was really cool. It was like she was using her surroundings to her advantage. She knew that it was dark, and so she was using the cover of the trees and the dark of the night to be able to hide in the shadows, and she only ignited her lightsabers when she was ready to strike a killing blow, which I thought was really cool. I thought that was a very interesting way for her to go about fighting. I don't specifically remember her doing that in the Clone Wars, but then again, I don't really remember too many nighttime lightsaber fights either. So I did think that was very interesting. Kind of shows that she's grown. I mean, if you think about it, having lived through the Clone Wars, she is a war veteran. So, obviously she is going to have learned, different ways to fight and to survive and everything like that. So yeah, I thought that was also, I will completely agree with you. I thought that was a really cool opening, and it was as we're going to explain, this entire episode was sort of like a mashup of the two kind of bases for this entire series, where it's like kind of reminiscent of old spaghetti westerns and like old samurai films. They kind of mashed the two together into this episode, and this opening was very much like an old samurai flick, where you've got the lone ronin hiding in the woods, and you've got the new guard, or the new person in charge of the town that's just trying to stop this dude from the one lone ronin from killing all of these supposed like way more advanced soldiers or whatever. I thought that was kind of neat, and definitely a cool nod to, again, what this entire series is sort of based off of.
I did see a few of the entrances made by Ahsoka, like when she was in the dark. It's towards the end of the episode, and she just turns on her sabers, and then boom, she's there. And you didn't see her in the background before that. I love how they did that. I mean, Dave Filoni being in charge of both shows, he can take what he wants, and he did a really great job. I'm still lukewarm on Rosario Dawson, but I love the character. So overall it was good. I love seeing her brought into live action, and she, I don't know, she had a few like moves that were slower than I thought, but she is an older person now. She's not the Clone Wars. I don't know how old she was supposed to be back then, but then she went through the Rebels, the whole Rebels show, and she's older. So maybe she's not as quick. Yoda was pretty quick when he was 900, but age affects everybody differently. But loved seeing this character in the show.
And I definitely got that same feel that Doug did. Definitely more samurai than Western in this episode. You have Din landing and him going into town and everyone afraid to even talk to him until the magistrate calls him over and basically, offers him a staff of pure Beskar, or a spear of pure Beskar, if he will go kill the Jedi, because he's a hunter. And that's kind of what they do. And he never did agree to it. He always said, my price is high, or that's a tough thing. So they assumed he had accepted it, but he is very much about his creed. And if he says he's going to do a job, he's going to do it. And he made sure he did not say he was going to do that job.
Yeah, I was really waiting for that to come up, and I did kind of take note of that as well. So, good noting that, Keith. Yeah, as he mentioned, well, as he continuously mentions, how important the way is for him and his creed, and how he was obliged to help the other Mandalorians because they had worked out a deal, and therefore he had to continue to help them because this is the way after all. He was, absolutely down to every detail of that, of what they had asked him to do. They said, we will give you this Beskar spear if you go kill the Jedi. And yeah, he did not specifically say, yes, I'll go kill the Jedi, because he knew that there was no way he could. He was looking for the Jedi to pass on Grogu to, not to kill. So yeah, absolutely. But also, he wasn't just going to accept the spoils of, or the reward for having completed a task when he knew full well that he wasn't going to complete it either.
And then we get a nice little scene when, Din Djarin finally finds Ahsoka Tano, and out in the woods, we get a nice little fight scene. She gets her lightsabers out, he's blocking them. But the scene I liked, he uses that little rope to wrap her up, and she jumps over the thing to drag him up. He cuts it, and finally he's like, hey, Bo-Katan sent me. I'm not here to fight you. And, she obviously, with a name she's familiar with, stops fighting. He explains what's going on. And in a scene that was kind of like the exact opposite of every other, she's like, I can't train, Grogu or blah, blah. He goes, hey, I can help you with that town, because he knows, no one's going to give anything for free. So he's like already learning, hey, I got to offer my services to get anything done. And he does think, in the long run, it's going to get her to train Grogu and get, him off the Mandalorian's hands, because his mission will be complete, returning him to his people, but doesn't quite go the way he thinks it's going to go.
I like, Keith mentioned that there was a little battle when they meet. And of course, that's what happens with every stranger you meet in that galaxy. I mean, you never know if they're coming to kill you. But, there's a scene in there within the battle where Mando uses his cable to wrap Ahsoka up, and, she just flips over the tree and hangs him up by the tree. But that's the same kind of move that Boba Fett did to Luke Skywalker in Return of the Jedi. So I thought that was kind of neat. No, I'll go into Grogu in just a moment. Doug?
I think one thing that we need to mention about this episode is it's definitely a little bit different from some of the other episodes where the focus has always been on Din and, for the most part, the child. This episode was very focused on Ahsoka. From the very beginning of the episode, it was on her. We didn't even see Mando until after she had been introduced and killed off a whole bunch of soldiers and everything. So, this episode was primarily focused on reintroducing her into the Star Wars TV series. Since the last time that we saw her was, well, I guess technically, if you want to be literal, the last time we saw her would have been in the last season of Clone Wars. Time-wise, the last time we would have seen her was in Rebels. And we know that she was supposedly out searching for Ezra during the time of the rest of the conflict. She was out looking for Ezra during that point and after the Battle of Yavin. So I think that this was a nice way to sort of bring us up to speed on where she is and what she's been doing, and we find out exactly why she's even on this planet, why she's doing what she's doing, why she's alone, I guess. She's still on her mission. It's been several years. I don't know what's been taking so long, but this episode was very much focused on her. And I will agree with Dave. I felt that maybe this episode could have stood to be a little bit longer. Maybe Rosario Dawson could have done a little bit more lightsaber training. I really don't know. We'll probably have to wait for the, behind the scenes to see what exactly she did to prepare for the role. I don't want to say that she didn't have enough, but yeah, I will agree that she seemed a bit slow compared to a lot of the other lightsaber fights that we've seen in the past. I did notice, though, several times where she put herself in the typical Ahsoka stance, where she held the lightsabers backwards as opposed to, upright. She had them underhanded, and so I could tell that enough care was put into the actual character itself, which again, it speaks to Dave Filoni being the writer and the director of this episode and being the co-creator of Ahsoka Tano. Of course, he's going to take care to recreate this character, which is very difficult. It's very difficult to take a character that was born in animation and try to bring it into live action. Back when we were talking about Avatar: The Last Airbender, you might remember that we were speaking about the idea that they were eventually going to be making a live action series. We don't know where that's at anymore since the creators left that, but one of the big issues that they were facing and that they faced previously with that live action movie was this idea of bringing characters from a fantasy world that were born in animation and trying to incorporate them into live action. And I think for what it did in the time that they were given, I think it was okay. It could have been better, but it was okay. And I think because they spent this episode showing us so much of Ahsoka, I don't think that's going to be the last time that we see her in this series.
I wanted to mention that some people, although big Star Wars fans, couldn't get themselves to watch the animated series. They know about Ahsoka, but this is their first time actually seeing her. So to bring her to life with such a good representation of the same thing she was on the animated series is just another great thing for Dave Filoni.
And Doug was mentioning about Ahsoka still being on her mission, and I wanted to add a few things to that. One, in this episode, we see a Loth cat, which I thought was a little Ezra Bridger shout out saying, hey, this is still her mission. This is what she's going on. And maybe we're going to see him in live action at some point. I don't think it's going to be this season of The Mandalorian, but it could be in a spin-off Ahsoka show or something along those lines. And then I was thinking about, why is she by herself? Shouldn't she be working with Sabine possibly? And I was like, she probably still is. I think this was a lead she was following up on. Sabine might still be, she might even be with Bo-Katan, because obviously Bo-Katan knew where she was at that given time. So she has to have some knowledge of her plans and following up on leads, and maybe is even a part of, hey, I'm going to work to try to find Moff Gideon, get the Darksaber back. You guys are working to find Grand Admiral Thrawn and Ezra Bridger, but let's work together and, use our information together. So, it'll be nice to find out. I do think we're going to see Sabine Wren in live action at some point, whether it's this season or sometime else, but I think it is coming soon. I think all of the hints were there this episode.
Actually, Keith, Sabine was there the entire time. She was just inside the city walls spreading graffiti. I mean, how did you miss her?
The thing about what Keith just said, Ahsoka been there, and how did Bo-Katan knew that she was going to be there? So she's had to have been there for some period of time, but she knows where Ahsoka's going, what she's doing. But how long has she been there trying to get the information to find Grand Admiral Thrawn? That's the question.
I was actually a little surprised that she said his full title. I'm assuming that was probably for us, for the audience to, spit out the whole Grand Admiral Thrawn. But I feel like if, and it could have also been for people who had never heard of that character as well. Because that one is another one of those sort of like deep cuts where if you hadn't read any of the extended, books, and if you hadn't seen the animated series Rebels, then you probably wouldn't know who he is. But yeah, I'm just I was a little taken aback that she like gave his full Empire title, and I was just like, oh, I'm kind of surprised she didn't just say where's Thrawn, But then I was thinking, I'm like, okay, I guess depending on who that was aimed for, I get that.
And after that, we get what no one's going to expect. We get a Mandalorian and a Jedi teaming up to take down, the magistrate, get that information from her, whatever you want, save the prisoners, because no one's going to expect it. The magistrate is expecting the Mandalorian to take out the Jedi and save them. And, what we get was a nice little reference when they were getting ready to go out and, Ahsoka shows up at the town again. We see two HK-87s, which for those of you that don't know is a Knights of the Old Republic little Easter egg, because one of your party members was an HK-47 assassin droid, which was basically like those droids you saw there, only it called everybody meatbags all the time. So I think for the rest of this video, we're going to refer to each other as meatbags. But do you meatbags have anything to say?
I wanted to mention that Caladan and Corvus are both references to Dune, which obviously was a big inspiration to George Lucas when creating Star Wars. I love the fact that once Ahsoka met Grogu and found out his name, and she could communicate with him using the Force by reading his thought, not reading his thoughts, but she could feel his thoughts. I liked it that the backstory that she got from him, knowing that he was one of the younglings, or what were they? Just the little Padawans that were all killed, and he was removed for his own safety. What made him so special to be away from everybody else? That's what I want to know. And with her reading how afraid she is about losing Grogu is a he, viewing Din as his father. She's afraid that Grogu is going to turn into another Anakin. she's seen it happen before. Meat bag number 2 or 3?
Yeah, so I actually thought that was a little unusual in a way, but having rewatched some of the other Star Wars films, this seems to be a common theme for a lot of the mentor figures in Star Wars, where they're so caught up in the ideas of the Jedi way, where if you venture into what's considered leading into the dark side even a little bit, that's a huge no-no. Like, we see that even Yoda, who's been, out in the middle of some swamp planet for years, who you'd think has, would have learned a little bit from the mistakes of the old Jedi Order, still, speaks about this idea that Luke can't give in to his feelings, and Luke can't leave the planet and end his training early to go save his sister and friends, because it'll lead him down the path to the dark side. But it turns out that Luke's venturing into dark side territory what allowed him to win in the long run. It's what gave him the power to defeat Vader. It was his control over the dark side to allow him to stop short of killing Vader and sort of recenter himself. And I think that's a very important thing that the Jedi, or whatever is going to come after the Jedi, should have remembered, because even Luke in his old age, he seems to have forgotten this. And when he's getting ready to train Rey, for a good while after his confrontation with Kylo Ren, before he became Kylo Ren, when he was still Ben Solo, this idea that he allowed his fear of what he thought Ben would end up becoming, his fear to take over, and this idea that any sort of tread into the dark, or this allowing this fear to take over, was a big no-no. And so he didn't want to train Rey. And now we've got Ahsoka, who senses much fear in Grogu, sees that he's got an attachment to Din Djarin, and so therefore she refuses to train him. And I really wish that these Jedi mentors would just sort of realize the errors of the Jedi script, of the books that they're using, of their ways of learning and teaching, and realize that it's okay. It's okay to have some attachment. It's not the idea that they've got the attachment, that they've got some fear, that they've got some, love or whatever. It's this idea of understanding, acknowledging it, and being able to control it. And I was a little saddened to see Ahsoka also fall down that path, because I thought after what she had been through, that she wouldn't still stick so close to all of the Jedi teachings.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Doug. And because how can anyone bring balance to the Force if they haven't got a little bit of both? They can't just be straight up good all the time. I don't think it's, they're very strict on having attachments like that. But, like you're saying, you have to have some on both sides, or else you can't have balance.
And I'm glad you guys both brought that up, because after the battle and they get the city, and, Ahsoka, asks about Grand Admiral Thrawn and her back, and he's saying, okay, we have an agreement. You take him. She's like, no, I'm still not going to treat him, but take him to the planet of Tython, the ancient ruins of a temple that has a strong connection to the Force, and place Grogu on the Seeing Stone at the top of the mountain. And then Grogu can choose his path. And I think she chose Tython very specifically for a couple different reasons. One, because we've seen Baby Yoda use dark side powers. He choked Cara Dune in the first season when she thought, she was hurting Din, when he thought she was hurting Din Djarin. And we've seen him bring food to him by using the Force, which probably isn't the lightest side of all. But for those of you that don't know, Tython is a planet that is very strong in the Force. And it has two moons, one that is very strong in the light, one that is very strong in the dark. And the original Jedi, before they had this we have to be all good and all revered and all this good stuff, they were more gray Jedi-like. And if you were growing too strong in the light or too strong in the dark, you went to the opposite moon to kind of get that balance. And I want to bring up the one thing from Rebels that I thought of during this whole thing when she mentioned Tython in the show. If you remember when Kanan met that Bendu character up on that one planet, and he was taken aback by how much light side Kanan Jarrus had in him. And that is because he was part of the old belief that to have good balance, you have light and dark side. And Kanan was way too far to the light for him, and he thought that was a problem.
So before we move on and kind of wrap up our breakdown and review, there is two more things that I want to mention that kind of took place during this final showdown between Ahsoka and Morgan Elsbeth, the sort of woman who decided to name herself the magistrate of this village or of this planet or whatever. One of my takeaways of this, and I'm curious what the others think about this as well, is again kind of hearkening back to this idea that it was very much in the vein of kind of a samurai flick. Is you could kind of see that as Ahsoka entered, nobody was attacking her. She walked in slowly. She didn't attack the magistrate. Instead, they sort of looked at each other as if they were acknowledging we're going to have an honorable battle with each other. We're going to have a duel with each other. And there was no animosity really between the two. And in fact, Ahsoka didn't even, at least in my opinion, I don't think she fought with her full, remember, keep in mind, Clone Wars war veteran, she did not fight with her full ferocity that we've seen her take down tons of droids and, enemy soldiers or anything like that. Instead, she, for the most part, kept it very honorable. They were dueling with one another. We were able to see what that Beskar spear could do. So we've heard in the past that Beskar was made or was mined and used primarily to fight the Jedi. It was made to deflect blaster fire, which we've seen already happen with Din Djarin. And now we see that it can effectively deflect lightsaber blades, which is really cool. So a full-on spear of Beskar can be wielded and used almost like a saber in its own right to have a sword fight basically with a lightsaber. And I thought that was a very interesting concept. I liked actually seeing that the lightsaber itself couldn't cut through the Beskar. And I thought that was interesting. I did notice that towards the end of the duel, Ahsoka did finally start to take it a little bit more seriously. Again, she got into her normal stance where she held the lightsabers sort of upside down, or the one remaining lightsaber that she had. And she finally, ended the fight. But we don't see what ended up happening to the magistrate. I don't know if Ahsoka killed her, like off screen. I'm not entirely sure what exactly happened. But we know that her goal was to get information out of her, not to kill her. So I am curious what ended up happening at the end of that fight. But the other thing that I want to talk about is the standoff between Mando and the sheriff, whatever you want to call this, this sort of gunslinger character that was sort of just standing there. And again, this was where I got this idea that it was sort of like the spaghetti western Mandalorian sort of mashing up against this samurai flick that was Ahsoka's story. And so you've got Mando standing there, and he's got his hand just kind of hovering over his pistol. Doesn't even have his rifle with him. And then you see the other guy, and he's slowly moving his finger towards his trigger. And it's funny, they're just staring each other down, on this long dusty road. And I was waiting for it, and I was sitting there hoping that it was going to happen. And sure enough, we got Mando shot first.
And one other thing I want to talk about with Morgan Elsbeth is when Ahsoka was explaining who she was, her entire planet was destroyed, and then she started building the Imperial Starfleet, with the, natural resources of other planets, leaving them in ruin, which I thought was a funny line by Din, where he said, yeah, it looks like she's still doing it, as like all the trees are wiped out and the planet just looks almost on the brink of utter destruction. But if she's still at it, who is she building the ships for? Is this going to be a connection to the Emperor on Exegol and how he got all them ships? Or is this Thrawn, after being sent to hyperspace with Ezra at the end of Rebels, is this his play to get back into the game and be like a warlord or bring back the Empire in full strength? And she's working for Thrawn to build him his fleet so he can go up against the likes of Moff Gideon or anyone else.
And as long as we're going back a little bit, I wanted to speak about Ahsoka sending him to Tython, because he could go up there, Yoda, Baby Yoda, Grogu, whatever you want to call him, Ragu. He's going to go there and sit on a seeing stone, similar, I would assume, to the one that Luke sat on in The Last Jedi. And that's where he projects himself into battle across the galaxy with Kylo Ren. I also wanted to speak on, yes, that last scene with Ahsoka and the magistrate. It reminded me of Kill Bill, with the samurai type attitude, and the showdown with the sheriff or whoever he was. That was Michael Biehn. You might know him from Alien or Terminator. But this is the first time I've seen him where he was a bad guy and he didn't have facial hair. If you look back through all of his movies, he's either a good guy or a bad guy, and you could tell by how much hair he's got on his face.
Before we get to the review of these 2 episodes in this video, we're going to go into a little theory palooza, if you will, about some of the things that happened in these last 2 episodes and where we think they might be going. And I think for me, the talk has all been about, getting to this planet, seeing the Seeing Stone, and who's going to be there, who's going to answer the call, what Jedi are left. You got Luke Skywalker, you got Cal from the Jedi Fallen Jedi Order video games, but I don't think they're ever going to make it there this season, because we do know that Moff Gideon has placed a tracker on Din Djarin's ship on the Razor Crest. So I think he's going to be making his way, and he's going to get sidetracked. And at some point, Moff Gideon is going to get his hands back on Grogu, and he is going to get his Dark Troopers built, and he's going to perfect that cloning process with Force-sensitive clones. And it's going to take the teaming up of Din, Bo-Katan, Ahsoka, maybe Sabine Wren, definitely Cara Dune, to take down, Moff Gideon, or at least get Baby Grogu back. I don't think Moff Gideon is going to be taken down this season, but I do think we're not seeing this planet in the Seeing Stone until at least season 3.
Now for a few of my little mini theory paloozas, plural, paloozas. Anyway, so I'm going to start with the first episode that we talked about in this video. Again, these are just kind of little mini, this is where I think this is going to go. So again, I kind of briefly spoke about this idea of the clones, and Dave kind of spoke about this as well. I don't think that this is specifically Snoke himself. I think it is a Snoke. I think it's just them trying to perfect the idea of using blood, using midichlorians in order to be able to transfer the Force or control of the Force to a living being. Because again, I think the way that they're looking at it is from a purely scientific approach, the Empire anyway. They're not looking at it, at least Moff Gideon and his crew, they're not looking at it from the sort of spiritual sense that a lot of other people in the galaxy do. They're looking at it from a pure sort of scientific approach, where they think this is something that they can specifically transfer from one being to another. Now, I don't know where Palpatine lies on that whole spectrum. He seemed pretty on board with the whole Sith ideology, but at the same time, he kind of made a comment in The Revenge of the Sith. He made a comment where he had mentioned that when he was talking to Anakin, he mentioned that you can't completely ignore one side for the other, and it was kind of his way to justify having knowledge of the dark side and of the Sith. And even though we know that that was kind of BS, I think that that is true about his character. I think it's true that he would have thought a lot of this through. The fact that he had planned out his entire way of getting himself into the seat of becoming the emperor, having, forged this whole fake war in order to do it. So we know that he was obviously aware of what was going on Kamino. We know that he had his hand in that, in setting a lot of that up. We know that he was aware of this idea that they could mass produce soldiers. But I wonder how much he knew about this idea of, or, how much he had thought ahead about the idea of transferring, force powers from one person to another. I'm a little curious if that was something that he had thought out, or if, again, this is like a pure Moff Gideon thing that he just happened to take advantage of. As far as my only other theory that I'm going to touch on for now, it has a little bit to do with, no, I'm sorry, two more. I apologize. I lied. It has to do with that Beskar spear, first off. I believe that this is going to be kind of I think this is going to come in handy for Din. I think the fact that we know Moff Gideon has the Darksaber, and even though he might not know how to properly wield it, he might not know actual, lightsaber fighting arts or anything like that. I think he's going to be full of himself enough to pull it out, thinking that it's going to offend the Mandalorian if he uses it because of its history of what it means to Mandalorian culture. And I think he's going to try and throw Mando off by using it. But what he doesn't expect, what he isn't going to see coming, I think, is when Din pulls out that Beskar spear and is actually able to duel with Moff Gideon and actually, fight him off and stand a chance at beating him. And the third thing kind of goes into this idea of the Seeing Stone and taking Grogu to it. I agree with Keith. I don't think that's going to happen this season. Again, because of that whole tracker that is on Din Djarin's ship. I think there's going to be a lot more confrontation with Imperials. But when and if they do happen to get around to it, I know a lot of people are hoping, they're doing the same thing that they did at the end of The Last Jedi and before The Rise of Skywalker, trying to theorize what this is going to mean, what's going to happen. All these people are screaming, oh, it's probably going to be Luke or it's going to be somebody else famous. I don't think they're going to do that. I really don't. I think it's going to be maybe somebody, from the Clone Wars or from Rebels. We'll get maybe another Dave Filoni special. But I don't think it's going to be Luke Skywalker. I don't think it's going to be Ben Solo. I don't think it's going to be, anything like that. In fact, what I think we're going to end up finding out, or what is going to end up happening, is I think we're going to end up figuring out that Din is force sensitive. We kind of touched on that a while ago. We mentioned this idea that he might possibly be force sensitive, and I think that might end up getting revealed when they go to this Seeing Stone. I think we're going to find out that because he's already shown to have a bit of a connection with Grogu, I think once he sets him on the Seeing Stone, he'll connect with him better with the Force. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see, what path he chooses and whether some sort of, Sith-like character confronts him or some random, Jedi confronts him. We'll have to wait and see.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, Doug, because I did notice in this episode when they're doing the test and Ahsoka, raises the stone and he brings it to him and he's not working, they're talking about, Din is talking about how Grogu is so stubborn. But you know what? Mandalorians are also extremely stubborn. And I do think that Din could be forcing down his actual force sensitivity with that stubbornness, the same way Grogu was doing it to kind of keep himself safe. And if you notice in this episode, there's a moment when she says, connect to him. And there's a nice little directing thing that Dave Filoni does where it kind of zooms in and you hear this kind of ding, this like bell. And that's when he pulls the little ball from the ship out to him. And I think that's a huge reveal that she understands that Din is force sensitive, and going to that planet and sitting on the Seeing Stone is exactly what Doug said. It's going to show him that he is truly force sensitive, and that is going to end up with the end of this show at some point, season 5 or wherever we're going with it, that Din wins the Darksaber by beating Moff Gideon in combat, and he takes the Darksaber and becomes the next Mandalore, unites all the clans and brings about the next great glory to Mandalore. And this could be what we're going to see past Rise of the Skywalker in any movies and trilogies. We're going to see more of Mandalorians back in power, and maybe they might even be the bad guys a little bit because they go back to their old ways of conquering and doing all that other stuff. And we see the New Republic or whatever is left, maybe trying to stop them or at odds against them. And that'd be nice, really knowing the backstory from both sides, where it's kind of, they're clashing, but there's no real good, no real evil. And we see where that goes. And then finally, the one thing that I was thinking about while watching this episode is, well, during Rise of Skywalker, we kept hearing, this is the end of the trilogy of trilogies, and it's going to wrap everything up, and it's going to be awesome, and it's going to be great, and the greatest thing it ever was, and it certainly wasn't. But I kind of see where The Mandalorian is kind of bridging all of these trilogies together. And I don't know how they're going to do it yet, but we know someone took Baby Yoda from the temple before Order 66. Was that Moff Gideon? Or was it someone working for Moff Gideon? So he knew the high end count, knew he could get him, and maybe he had some plans. He was an intelligence trooper at some point. They mentioned that in season 1. So he probably has knowledge of the possibility of getting force sensitive clones, and he knows he needs possibly the blood or the DNA of someone strong in midichlorians, Baby Yoda. He knows something's coming up. He knows something big is coming up. So he takes that opportunity to get Baby Yoda, tying it into Revenge of the Sith, the prequels. And then we find out, his memory is dark after that. But we find out maybe some rebels actually freed him during the original trilogy. They got some intel, they ended up freeing him, and that's where he is when Din finally runs into him at the beginning of Mandalorian, kind of tying it into the original trilogy. I don't know if it's going to be, I doubt it's going to be Luke and Leia and them saving him, because, they can't really do that and them not really have any knowledge of Grogu at any time past that. But someone, maybe a Wedge or a Mon Mothma, or, someone is going to say it, and that's going to tie that into the original trilogy. And then obviously, if they have his blood being used for Snoke, and ends up that's the main ingredient to get Palpatine's, body back to full strength and what he is in Rise of the Skywalker, that can tie all 3 trilogies together and actually do a lot better than Rise of Skywalker does.
I wanted to mention that something that me and Keith had talked about off camera, and we were joking at the time, but I don't know, as we were talking through this video, maybe it makes more sense to me that with Ahsoka saying that Grogu is, he could turn into another Anakin. That's what she's thinking. Perhaps, the next trilogy of movies is when Grogu is the big bad. You don't know. Maybe he goes bad with his dark. He just goes down that dark side path, and like Keith said, maybe the Mandalorians are on his side, or maybe the Mandalorians end up battling him. It's just a theory, and this is a theory palooza. Just one of them.
And now we get to the review part of our episode, and we're going to be talking about both Chapter 12 and Chapter 13, The Siege and the Jedi. And to me, I think The Siege was a much better episode overall. It had a lot of, awesome things. I think the fight scene with, Cara Dune at the beginning and seeing Greef and where that town is after the events of season 1, I thought was really well done. I liked seeing, an old Imperial base where they got a lot of good information, even though they might not know it now, of what's going on with Moff Gideon and where he's going. And, just all around, Horatio Sands was back. I thought that was really nice that he was back and, adding a little comedic element, to what was going on. And we saw Din Djarin, at his finest and, jetpacking up and taking care of what he needs to do, jetpacking all the way back, having his ship, come back at that end there to kind of save the day, very Star Wars-esque. But then we got, in the Jedi, we got, some things I think all of us have been waiting years and years for, Ahsoka Tano live action, which I thought they handled extremely well. We talked about it, the introduction she had where she's kind of blending into the shadows and doing all that. The story and what she was looking for fit into where it should be. She's still on her mission to find Thrawn and Ezra. And I thought that was great. Their path might get, sidetracked a little bit with what's going on with Grogu and the Mandalorian, but that's great. We've talked about it all the time. Things get sidetracked. Nothing ever goes according to plan. And then, so many, we find out that she was working for Thrawn in this. We see the Loth Cat, which I think is a hint at Ezra Bridger coming up at some time. And it really was just an amazing, Star Wars-y sort of episode. But for me, I think I give The Siege probably about an 8.8 out of 10. And then for the Jedi, it was good. It wasn't great. There was some good stuff in it, but overall, I think I'll just say it wasn't great. I don't want to delve too much in that, but I'm going to give that a 7.8 out of 10.
I mostly agree with Keith. I thought the Siege was a way better episode than the Jedi. I did have to sort of turn my hype meter down. It was, clocked at 12, waiting for, oh my God, we're getting Ahsoka Tano. I can't believe it. I can't wait. Oh my gosh, we've been waiting for this. We knew it was going to come ever since that first trailer dropped. Sabine Wren's going to be in here finally. Eventually we're going to see all this awesome stuff. It's going to be so cool. So going into this episode, I was like, okay, I have to turn that hype meter down. I have to look at this as, a bit of an outsider, from a very critical perspective, and I can watch it again later and actually enjoy it. And I will say that doing that, it sort of allowed me to really turn a critical eye on it, and both of these episodes. And so looking at, and watching the Siege, I loved seeing Din come back to Nevarro. I thought it was great that he was able to meet up again with the new magistrate, if you will, and be able to see where his friends are at now at this point in time. I think it was really cool being able to actually see what the Imperials were up to on this planet, and kind of get an idea and get my theory brain working on what could end up happening and what was going on, and basically what the Empire's up to at this point in time, really, kind of, because I think this is starting to become more of, the interesting part of this series is, what is the Empire doing? They aren't fully gone yet. We see that the New Republic is trying to, get rid of them all and trying to take back control and set up its new government. But yeah, the Empire's still kind of doing its thing. They're almost like ignoring the fact that the second Death Star has been blown up and that they were thoroughly defeated and that their emperor is dead. They're just like, yeah, we're cloning now. It's cool, whatever. What do you want? And they've got, got their stormtroopers, and so we've got lasers and we've got hallways and explosions and flying, and we've got, an awesome ship that's, with a turret mount, and, laughing as we blow up and murder people and ships and everything. I was telling the guys in our chat as we were talking about this episode, this was peak Star Wars, in my opinion. It was a good episode. And in my opinion, after looking at these two together, the Siege and the Jedi, I have to agree with Keith. I think the Siege was better. Now, as far as the Jedi is concerned, again, we had kind of mentioned that this was purely an Ahsoka Tano episode. This was for her. It was to reintroduce her now into live action, but to sort of bring her into the series whole. But what I think they did wrong is, I think Dave Filoni assumed that more people knew who she was and knew about her. And I think they should have made this a longer episode than what it was. I think they should have made this episode about the same length as the Marshal, the first episode of the season. I think they should have given it a little bit more time to breathe, because if you're going to introduce a character that so far has only been in comic books and in an animated series and in novels that not everybody is fully aware of, especially people who only see the films and have only just started watching The Mandalorian. I think you need a little bit more time to better introduce her character. However, I did like the initial opening. I liked the fight scene. I loved the fact that we saw that she is in fact a warrior. I love that clearly some care went into making sure that they displayed her character right-ish. I won't say it was perfect, but it was about as good as I think we could expect for transitioning her to a live-action role. I was a little put off because I'm used to her having a slightly more high-pitched voice. So that did kind of take me out of it initially until I got used to it. Because, again, I had watched a couple of episodes of Clone Wars and Rebels leading up to this, to kind of remind myself, okay, where did we last leave off with her? And, having heard what she sounded like in the animated series, and then hearing her in this episode, while they had the choreography down well, she's a little bit slower, but she held the lightsabers correctly, and her fighting style was very much in the same vein that I would expect Ahsoka to be. Her voice wasn't quite right, and I think that maybe a little bit more care could have been placed into that. But she looked like Ahsoka. she acted like Ahsoka, except for the fact that you know, what I spoke about earlier with the guys, where I said I was a little taken aback that she fell into the same sort of area that a lot of other Jedi, not masters, but you know, people who are there to train other folks. I was a little taken aback that she sort of fell into that same sort of, well, we're afraid of training somebody who has fear or attachments. And I was a little disappointed to see that that's where she was at. But I also understand the fact that she's probably suffering from Star Wars version of PTSD after having seen her old master Anakin, after slicing part of his mask off, seeing that he became Darth Vader. So I kind of get that. So as far as this episode goes, I liked some of the lighting. I liked some of the action. Mostly, I actually liked some of those action set pieces. I really liked the duel. I talked about that. That was probably one of my favorite parts. And I liked how it was intercut with Din Djarin facing down this sort of sheriff character. And I absolutely loved how they were basically having a standoff to see who was going to shoot who first. So I thought it was a decent episode. It wasn't great. So the Siege, I'm going to give that an 8 out of 10. And I'm going to give the Jedi a 7 out of 10. It was fine. Could have been better. And the reason why I'm giving the Siege, you know, not a straight up 9 out of 10, it was also fine. It was good. But again, comparing it to some of the other episodes that we've seen so far, it has a little bit more to live up to, because I think so far the Marshal and I think the Marshal is probably one of my favorite episodes so far. That was you know, an excellent episode. So I turn it over to Dave.
I have to agree with both you guys as far as these two episodes. I'm going to be a little bit quicker with it, but the Siege, I think it's one of those episodes that you watch and you don't think it's as relevant at the time, but something comes back to it later. I know they planted that little seed with the M count, and then they threw Moff Gideon at the end. The rest of the show was the action was incredible. I loved it. And with the Jedi, yeah, that was basically an Ahsoka Tano episode. They got to reintroduce her. People got to realize who she is. There's been a lot of hype, like Doug said. And for the people who have never seen her in animation or in the books, it was a great introduction. Could have been better. So looking at the Siege, I would rate that probably an 8.5 out of 10. And the Jedi, I would give that an 8.0. So, you know, it could have been better, but I still think it was good work compared to the rest of the season so far.
And now the moment you've been waiting for. How do you win a year of Disney Plus on us? Simple, really. Step 1, like this video.
Step 3, subscribe to our channel. Not only will subscribing get you one step closer to winning, but it will automatically enter you into any future contests on this channel as long as you're still subscribed.
Step 3, Dave, I think you might have missed something.
All right, step 4. I mean, 2. I don't math.
Wow. Okay. Well, step 3 is to leave a comment below. Not just any comment, however. We really want you to tell us who your favorite character of The Mandalorian is so far, what your favorite chapter is. It really doesn't need to be a long answer. Just kind of tell us what you like about The Mandalorian so far and why.
And the winner will be announced in next week's video. Keith will be drawing it from a hat.
And with that year's subscription, you get the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian, you get WandaVision, you get Falcon and the Winter Soldier, you probably get the Loki series, and you get tons of more Star Wars and Marvel movie cartoons, pretty much everything on Disney. It's definitely worth it, so tell your friends, get everyone subscribed and liking and giving us a comment, and thank everybody for watching. You know, try and stay safe and healthy this holiday season, and we'll see you next time on Not Your Status Quo.